Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to show a lab on how to attack servers. Okay, so what we're going to do is we know we can go through our process and methodology. We've already talked about information gathering using Nmap and those types of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a tool called Nexpose Community Edition. It's a commercial tool, but the Community Edition is free and you can use, it's limited, but you can use it to look at the tool. What we've got here is instead of using Kali Linux, my Community Edition is set up on Backtrack 5R3, so I'm going to use Backtrack 5R3 for this case. And what I have here in this shell is actually what I've done. I've created a little script for me to know how, or students when I give them this virtual machine, how to start and activate Nexpose. So what you do here is in the first step, right, it says opt rapid 7. So we do a cd / opt / rapid 7 / Nexpose / nsc. And then what we do is a ./nsc.sh. Now, for you to do this, you have to register with Rapid7 and get a community edition of Nexpose. But it's pretty easy. You just do an apt-get space install Nexpose, and it goes out and downloads, installs it. You just go to their website and you apply for a community key and follow the user manual and the guide on how to activate it. So now what it's going to do is it's going to actually run the shell script for Nexpose. And it's going to take a little bit of time because it's going to run out and it's going to download all the updates for the tool as you see and update it. And this is what it's doing in this process. So if you're following along, this should be happening on your screen right now. It should be running and doing all this extra stuff. Now, if you don't have an internet access, then it will fail and you won't be having this stuff come to your screen. So if it failed, it means more than likely you probably don't have internet access. So this is what we're doing here, and it's showing you different things. And it's going to run. Initialization successful. So while it's running here, let me open up another tab, another shell, and actually do an ls to see how I've got the script file. So if I do a cd /root ls, there's my script file. So I do a cd script, this is a folder, ls, and what I've done is I've created all these text-based scripts so I know how to do things because I might not remember the exact command sequence. So if I do a more Nexpose, this is the script for Nexpose. So once it loads, which it's doing right now, as we say right here, you will see a prompt connect to HTTPS localhost 3780, and that's what we'll do once it finishes. So we just wait for it to actually finish. So if we go back to our shell, it's download and update. See, right there it is. So it's still continuing to update in the process, and this can take some time depending on how long it's been since you updated the tool. Now that the actual Nexpose has loaded, we just got to actually connect to the local host on port 3780. So we go into Firefox, we go into 127.0.0.1.3780 login.html, and we log in with a username and a password. Now this is actually the Nexpose dashboard. So what we have here is we have all the scans we've done. As you see, this old Windows 2000 box had 143 vulnerabilities and a very high risk rating. Well, we've got a Windows Server 2003 machine that we've added, which is our target, the one we used previously. And all we do now is we click on scan. Any site details, anything you want to add to it, that's kind of what we do. We look at it, we verify. Are we scanning 192.168.177.132? Yeah, and you can specify more one assets to scan, so a lot of different things we can do. And start now. And the scan starts. And there it goes. And now it's running traffic and running a scan. So it's in progress, and it'll run, and it'll take some time, as vulnerability scanners do. They're very loud, they're very noisy, and they do some scanning. But we would do it if we have a service or something that we can scan. And as it scans, it will start telling us what it finds, if it finds any vulnerabilities or anything else. And there it goes. It continues to run and do the different scans. Now it's got the discovered asset. Now I know it's Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 1 or 2. Hasn't figured out which one yet. It's got a name on the target, the 2003 target. So it's getting all this information and data by scanning the target. And remember, the nice thing about servers are the server service, there's going to be server services running. So right now we're looking at attacking the server itself. So we've got a Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 2. So what we'd do is we would start looking for vulnerabilities for that. The scanner is doing that for us. It just saves us the time of trying to research. If you see, we've already got 15 vulnerabilities set up on this box. And it continues to actually scan. So there's going to be quite a few vulnerabilities on this box, as we know, because we've already compromised it. So yes, it does have vulnerabilities. So what we'll do is once the scan finishes, we'll go and turn on the firewall and see how well it does. We love the time. It says elapsed 1 minute, remaining 1 minute. It's like Microsoft time. It doesn't really ever tell you the right time. So I don't know why it bothers to tell you how much time's left, because it doesn't really work. And it continues to tell you remaining 1 minute, but we've elapsed 2 minutes now instead of 1 minute. So it wasn't exactly what they said. What you might want to do as you're doing this and setting in your test lab and testing it is run Wireshark or another protocol analyzer and see what the actual tool is sending into the network. Now we're up to 18 vulnerabilities. And it's continuing to scan. Oh, 24 vulnerabilities. Completed successfully. Completed. So now we go over to our vulnerabilities. And these are our vulnerabilities on our machines. So this is the vulnerability, and it tells us the CVSS score, which is nice, and it tells you what the CVSS score is. So we have a lot of vulnerabilities on this, and we knew we had lots of vulnerabilities because we set this box up for that. So when you start looking here, here's all critical. These are all critical, this one's severe. So it tells us exactly what to do. Exceptions, right? Create a vulnerability exception, those types of things. So it's a nice little tool, and it is commercial. So you have to pay for it, which is unfortunate, but I mean, that's the reality in most cases, is a lot of the vendors charge for their products. All right, now, nice job, give the tool credit. It found some cool stuff. So let's go back to our assets page, home page. And we've got our server 2003, and there's the scan box, so we can actually click the scan again, right? But before we do that, let's go turn on the firewall. So now we're going to turn on the firewall on the box. Now, very important, see this don't allow exceptions? If we enable that, then nothing will come through. But we know a server is going to have to allow some services, so we won't touch and put a check mark here. You would on a client, because client shouldn't have anybody connecting to it anyway. Okay, so the firewall's on. Now we go back to our Nexpose. And now we scan again. And start now. And there it goes. Remember, the firewall's on now. And it's scanning. And what we can do while we're waiting for the scan is I can go in another shell here and run Wireshark, a nice protocol analyzer. So just like Wireshark, put it in the background. Let it run. Ignore the fact that I'm running as root. I know I'm running as root. I'm okay with that. And then select my interface, which is ETH0, and start a capture on ETH0. And now ETH0 is the network that Nexpose is running on. As you see, it's sending all kinds of cool traffic and doing all kinds of cool stuff. It's getting a lot of this different types of things, destination unreachable, some resets in there, and the net bias. So because we didn't put in the actual check mark for don't allow exceptions, some traffic is coming back to the scanner, but not very much. And the scanner continues and continues to try to find more information about the target. So let's go see how the scanner is doing. It's at least got it knows it's Windows Server 2003, but it doesn't know that from before. Doesn't really tell us that much. Vulnerabilities, it's got 9, and the scan has completed. Okay? But it's still loading discovered assets. See, the problem is, right, it's having a problem when it comes to determining what is there. And this is how these scans actually work, right? So if you watch it, it's still scanning and completed successfully. And now it has 8 vulnerabilities in it instead of, I believe it was 18 or something like that. So now if we go and we click on vulnerabilities, still has a few critical vulnerabilities, right? The different types of things. But I'm wondering if it's doing this because it had a database already. So let's do this. Let's test the tool. So let's go down and create a new site. So let's create a new site, and we'll create a new site. That way we have a new one, and we'll call it Server 2003 FW. So this is the firewall on. The IP is going to be the same IP. And we'll use full audit and some credentials and authentications, and we're good. Save the scan. Go back to our assets. And there we have Server 2003 firewall. And now we scan it. And start now. Now the scan is going against the firewall again. So let's see what it gets. While we're waiting, let's go watch some Wireshark stuff. So we'll go capture, restart in Wireshark. This restarts our capture. And you see all these SYN packets going out. These are all synchronized packets going out trying to get a connection. As you notice, the only thing that's coming back is net bias, because net bias is allowed by default with the firewall on in Windows. All we have to do to stop that is select that block all incoming connections. But if we did that, then of course we wouldn't get anything into the target, and that would be a problem. So because we are continuing this net bias, that's probably why the tool's able to pick up some findings. And that's what it's doing here. So once the firewall's on, we're limiting the capability of the tool. It's only going to find the net bias types of vulnerabilities. And it's continuing the scan. The firewall on makes it more difficult. So this is why we always say vulnerability scanners, yes, you can use them, but usually filters or firewalls make it more difficult for them to get through. Now remember, we're only selecting and setting the Windows firewall. We have not went in and put a router in place. We have not went in and put a Bastion host in place, as we've been talking about in the red team hacking. In red team hacking, these are all things you have to contend with and have to make sure you practice ways to get through it. Sometimes you can't get through it. You only get through it on the services or what it allows into the architecture. So as it goes through here, completed successfully. And let's go see what vulnerabilities we have. Guess we go to the vulnerabilities page. So again, it's got some of these vulnerabilities, but what are these vulnerabilities? These vulnerabilities, no password is easy enough, and those types of things, are all part of understanding the actual vulnerabilities that are on the target. So when we put the firewall on, it struggles and has a much more difficult time with it. All right. So now that we've done that, we will go and look at one other vulnerability tool we have, and we'll do that in Kali Linux. Because OpenVAS is free, and the nice thing about OpenVAS, anything free, is most cases, if it works pretty well, it is in Kali Linux. So we go here, we go under the applications, and we go under Kali Linux, and we go under vulnerability analysis. OpenVAS. To set up your OpenVAS, you're going to click on this OpenVAS setup, and then it'll load all these plugins and do all these different types of things. But what we want to do is we want to start OpenVAS because we've already set it up for you. So we just open up what's called Greenborn Security Desktop. And now we have to log in and enter a profile. Well, the profile server address is 127.0.0.1. And then we got to log in. When you create it, you will create this login. And now this is actually the OpenVAS interface called Greenborn Security Desktop. So now we go Task, New Task. We give it a name, so we'll call this one Server 2003. Scan Config. We'll do Full and Fast Ultimate. Scan Targets. We got to add a target. We're going to add the target and call it Server 2003. The host 192.168.177.132. Port list, we can do all or we can do ranges. So there's different things we can do and different things we can set up. Okay, SSH credentials and SMB credentials. So if we know credentials, we could do and use those. Great. There's our target, okay? So now what we want to do is we're going to scan it. So we'll click on this play button, but in defense of OpenVAS, we need to go turn the firewall off on our target first to see how it does without a firewall, and then do a corresponding with a firewall. So we turn it off, click OK, and now we scan. So now we scan, and it does this requested thing, which means it's requested. And when's it going to scan? Well, it's up to the Greenborn Security Desktop when it decides, okay, it's time to scan. And we don't have really any control of that. And it's scanning now, when it's right now at 1%. So if we go to our Server 2003 machine, we have Wireshark in it also. So we can actually go into Wireshark here in the Windows environment and watch Wireshark also. Again, always when you're running your scanning, especially attacking any servers, anything like that, you want to know what the tool is doing. So here we go, capture interfaces, and we're going to capture on the 177 interface, and there it goes. There's all this traffic going out and in and out, and these are just scans being carried out by box 128, which is the attacker. So now we go back to Kali Linux, do a refresh on our OpenVAS, and see where we're at. Oh, we're at 32%. So we're getting there. We're actually getting there. Go back and watch our server. Lots of traffic coming. Telling us work group, it's got all that stuff, and it's doing a lot of web stuff. See all this web stuff coming through here? So it's doing a lot of web stuff. We go back to Kali Linux. Greenborn Security Desktop, and we're at 40%. So we'll continue on, and we'll go until the scan gets done, and then it'll tell us what the threat rating is. We already seen in Nexpose, which is a nice scanner, it's a commercial scanner, and now we're doing it in OpenVAS, which is a free open source scanner. Right? There's other tools. There's lots of vulnerability tools out there. Remember what I said in the opening. Pick a few tools, master them, and they will become the tools you use when you're doing your red team hacking. And that's kind of the concept here. I'm just showing you a couple tools. What one you're going to use is largely dependent on you, what you're comfortable with. Myself, I'm comfortable more with Unix and Linux than Windows. I usually use a Unix or Linux type tool. So as it goes through here, we're getting 68%, so we're continuing to scan, do different things. So as we look at Server 2003, it's still getting traffic, lots of traffic coming in here, right? Different things like that. So what you want to do from our red team standpoint, and we'll show you how to do this at the end, we want to look at some of these and see what the actual responses are. So we'll look at that momentarily. But before we do that, we're concentrating on the OpenVALA scanner, which is 86% done now. '94, we're almost done. We'll probably see the scan tapering off here as we're watching the packets. It'll slow down. It'll slow down because it's getting near the end of the scan. And we're just waiting here for it to finish. And once it finishes, we'll look at the different things that come up. Sitting there at 94%. It must be sending lots of packets still. Yeah, it's still sending a lot of stuff. From our hacking standpoint, we're only concerned with what actually gets through. So as you look here, these are all GET requests coming through in different types of things. Lots of not found, .. directory traversal, stuff like that. So a lot of different things that they'll use when they're trying to do the attacks. '96, so we're almost there. There's some more information through there that was some interesting looking text. Oh, look how it slowed down now. So let's go check. It's probably done. 98, yep, almost done. And it's free, so of course it's probably not going to have the bells and whistles of your commercial tools, but it works okay. Does what we need it to do. I'm just waiting for it to finish. Not sending me more packets, so I think it's just going through and compiling its results now. Tells us it's Server 2003, our target, and gives us information and details about the target. Reports, notes, and all kinds of information. And we just wait for it to finish now. Well, we're waiting for it to finish. Looks like our box is probably crashed. That's what happens with vulnerability scanners. They crash your machines. But as long as we get a report off of it, that's all we care about. While that finishes scanning, we're going to switch to an easier interface. This Greenborn Security Desktop is new and in Kali Linux. I think it's easier to follow in the Greenborn Security Assistant. And it's just the same, when you select the Greenborn Desktop, you just say you start the Greenborn Security Assistant. And that's what I've done here is started the Greenborn Security Assistant. So what we do there is we watch our scan, similar like we did before. As you see, this is one of the scans right here. But it gives us a little bit more intuitive, I think, and easier to read format. So nice thing is too, if you want to immediately scan an IP, they got a little tutorial here. You just click in here and give it the actual information and it'll scan. So all we're waiting in now is for the scan to finish. Once it finishes, we'll look at the results. So we're about, what, 94%. If we go back to our server 2003, there's the actual scan information again on our Wireshark. So these are the different scans taking place. So as we look through this, there's a lot of information. So we've kind of overwhelmed this poor little machine, I'm afraid. And that's what happens when you use scanners. They're really loud. We call them, they're like sledgehammers. There's like sledgehammer on the network. So they just hammer and pound the network into submission. And that's all we're doing now is just waiting for this scan to finish. We have other scans here, but we won't do those. We just want one to finish here. Once it finishes, we'll look at the vulnerabilities and the findings. Remember, part of our red team hacking is we'll use the tools, but a lot of what we're going to do is manual research. So when we find a service or a server banner, we take that, we search on the internet, and we manually look for vulnerabilities that we can exploit or validate from the tools that we've been discussing. Doesn't look like you're sending many more packets, but this box is kind of frozen, so. So once it finishes, it'll give us the trend, the threat, and information about the actual target. Similar how Nexpose did when we did the actual Nexpose lab. So 98, so should be done here in a minute. This is just more information we have over here. You can do the export to task, we can clone it, we've got the edit it, we can do task details, so a lot of different things we can do. Extras, the settings, performance, configuration, targets, port list, credentials, all these information that we have is actually now in a top bar menu item asset, which is easier than the old one. The old one actually had it on an actual left side, and it was a little bit clunky, which is why they've probably changed the interface quite a bit on this and the different things they've been doing. So we can actually see if we can cheat a little bit and go in here and see if it does anything while it's actually doing the types of things. So it's still running. Currency, the different things to override. So these are types of things, the task details. Tell us what it's doing. And what you want to do when you customize and you configure your environments with your red team is you want to create your own custom policies. So you'll go into this full and fast ultimate and see what it actually says. And you'll go in here and customize and configure policies. Like you might not want to look at 477 of the 477 buffer overflows. You might not want to look at all 5 of the Cisco. Maybe it's a CentOS. If it's not a CentOS, you probably don't want to do this. So you would go in and customize this policy and tune it, if you will, for the target environment that you're doing and you're doing your red team activities against. Okay, the scan is complete. So what we have now is we have a high threat level. So what we want to do is we want to go look at the findings. So we want to go look at these vulnerability findings for this task. And there they are. So it's got high, right? Different things and different threats. So it's got one high vulnerability that it found. So as you can see, the vulnerability scanner, again, will help us somewhat, but they're just a beginning when it comes to our hacking methodology and our process. So we looked at Nexpose and we looked at OpenVAS. You also could look at Nessus. Nessus is another scanner that you can get a community or what they call a home plug-in feed, and you can use Nessus. Or in your environment, if it's in your budget, look at purchasing one of the commercial vulnerability scanners. Bearing in mind that the vulnerability scanners are limited to usually a flat network, they usually require credentials, and they're only as good as the updated database that they contain. And this concludes the lab on using tools and attacking servers.